I just went through basically a major crash course in zoning and affordable housing. I know that some of you are aware of different pieces of this and are familiar with all of this, but I thought that this would be a good starting point for our conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I am going to sort of open it up. We've got a small enough group that I think we can probably take turns and have a conversation here without any issues. So if you'd like to ask a question, why don't we just start with sort of questions, and then if we want to get into thoughts or ideas, we'll get into that. But if anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask them. Yeah.
So I read about in Philadelphia where they have developers building, huge apartment complexes, usually high end, and they're given, these breaks. Maybe, I don't know if Philadelphia has inclusionary zoning, but they're offered breaks and variations in the zoning to, if they, as you said, make a certain percentage of the units affordable. And I keep reading about these developers who make these deals, and then they just simply don't do that. They just simply don't create the affordable units. And how do they get away with that? And is this not a binding legal thing if they've been allowed to make their building taller or wider or whatever, and then they just say, oh, no, changed my mind, not going to do any affordable?
Yes, that is. And then, typically, so there's a couple of things that happen. Yes, that does happen. Typically what happens is the city will then sue those developers and they will go into litigation. So it's an enforcement issue, and the degree to which the city is enforcing their affordable housing requirements, I'm not going to get I'm not going to make a comment on. But that's typically the process when the developer essentially doesn't do it, and there are remediations for that. So one is that let's say the developer goes through that process, does not provide any affordable housing, the city sues, they can get essentially money to the what in Philadelphia is Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so one of the issues with the city of Philadelphia's affordable housing inclusionary zoning requirement is it allows a developer to buy out of their affordable housing obligation and pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that works as long as the price to buy out of it is comparable to the price that it costs to construct the affordable housing and the value of the unit in the development that's being constructed. And that's very difficult. And then you get into the morass that is, all of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Housing Authority and all of that. I would say that in a town like Media, you have a lot less, there's a lot less likelihood of that happening because they're not going, they can't hide anywhere. It's a very small community. There's very little that they can go. But you do have to think about, if you do an inclusionary zoning ordinance, enforcing that and the probability that you may have to enforce that, but hopefully not. There are a lot of very, very good, honest, affordable housing developers out there that do very good work. And so, with a little vetting, you hopefully can attract some of them. Yeah, Terry.
Adam, is it fair to say that you could do inclusionary zoning with or without hybrid form-based zoning?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's an important thing that I want to emphasize here. Everything that I'm talking about could be done without a hybrid form-based code here. There's nothing particularly unique about it. Again, as I tried to emphasize at the beginning of the presentation, what the form-based code approach really brings into the situation is predictability. you're able to articulate and have a little bit more clarity as a community about what you're permitting to be built, and you're able to articulate and hold investors to a more rigid set of standards for construction, and that's really important.
So my follow-up question, be brief, is how likely that there's going to be a serious consideration of including inclusionary zoning in the recommendations that you make?
So like I said, we're not talking today about recommendations, and we're not moving forward to that. This is really an informational conversation. So I'm not going to comment about whether or not we are going to address inclusionary zoning as part of this process. We're quite frankly, we're just not there yet, Terry. We haven't gone through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Adeline, yeah.
You can call me Addie.
Okay, Addie.
Yeah, that's fine. So I have one comment. We did, as a group, have the opportunity to meet a developer from West Philadelphia, Ryan Spack. I don't know if you know him. He does some wonderful jobs of affordable housing, and he prefers not to work with a lot of government entities because he can get stuff done. But my question, I guess, is, or just if you feel comfortable, have you or your organization been involved in areas where there have been a successful affordable housing created because of the work that you've done with communities?
Yeah, you brought that up, and so, you know, right now we are actually working on 2 affordable housing plans in Connecticut that we're working on. So there haven't been any outcomes of that yet because the planning work is still done. And I recently just finished a downtown economic development plan that really worked with these same issues in a somewhat similar community. And as a product of that, they are going to be adopting a zoning ordinance that allows accessory dwelling units, and one that's going to essentially better match their zoning ordinance with their existing conditions. So they had a lot of single family zoning in place, and they had a lot of 2-family and twin and sort of development, and so permitting that. Again, that is literally just, you know, finished a couple of months ago, and so it's moving forward. So, you know, most of the work that FHI has done around this has been in the planning phases of it. I will say that everything that I've presented here is really based on best practices of communities. This is an incredibly difficult nut to crack, and there may, you know, as you all are very well aware, this is a regional and national issue that we're facing. I will say this, that one thing that is not included within my presentation that I do think is important to pay attention to is how relatively small media is as a community, and a recognition that a lot of these issues are county and regional issues. And so I know that you all have been working with the county and talking with them and continue to be looking sort of regionally about this. And I think it is something to really be paying attention to, because, you know, the idea that media might build its way out of its affordable housing, situation is, you know, pretty unlikely given the amount of demand that you're expected to see over the next 10 or 20 years and the sort of regional trends. Like, housing prices are going to go up. And so I think it will be behoove the borough and you all to really start paying attention to some of those early segments that I identified in the presentation, and starting to identify what is an appropriate mix of, you know, housing costs that you all are sort of comfortable with, and who are the segments that you really feel like are suffering or are most challenged by it, and really targeting those. And I commend you. I will say I talked to Andrew Svekla today at DVRPC, and he said that he talked to all of you about, or some of you about this as well. He's great. I think continuing to engage regional entities like that around these issues, and as you say, bringing in developers who you think are doing quality work, and identifying opportunities for them, and facilitating. In a community the size of Media, you can have impacts that way. That is not the case in a place like Philadelphia, like Karen talked about, where the market's so big, there's so many developers, there's so many variables going on that it's not the same.
Thank you.
condition. Yeah, Robin. And then Judy.
Do you have data from other communities that have adopted form-based zoning codes that show changes in affordability in terms of, the average home sale price or the average rental price, like a before and after scenario that could prove the effectiveness of this approach for affecting affordability? And I heard you had all kinds of sort of, caveats and some skepticism about, this being a sure thing for affecting affordability. I'm just wondering, is there data that shows, home prices going down or rentals going down, or at least remaining stable as a result of communities adopting this kind of code?
Yeah, so I want to address a sort of something that I'm hearing in your question that I want to be clear about. Most of the points that I talked about today are not specific to form-based codes. They are, changes in density are really around the kind of the core of all zoning: Euclidean, hybrid codes, form-based codes. So that certainly is something to be paying attention. Where I think the form-based codes have benefit and have, much more. This is much more of anecdotal evidence from the planning community and the zoning community, is that it makes denser development and therefore more affordable development more palatable to the general community. I mean, what the reality is part of the reason why America is in this affordable housing crisis is because we have a massively built single family home housing stock, and single family homes are about the most expensive, detached single family homes that are about the most expensive housing type that you can build, and the most expensive housing type to rent, and the most expensive housing type to own. And so, the solution to go towards more density, I think, hopefully was laid out in the case I was talking about. Just, quite frankly, it reduces the absolute cost of housing.
Yeah, no, I do. I understood the thrust of it and sort of the logic model of the greater density lowering the cost. And I understand about supply and demand. I'm just wondering if there are hard data that show a correlation.
Yeah, I mean, I can look around for you all and see there are certainly tons of studies out there that have looked at this. And I mean, it really comes down to, a very clear case is, made, as you saw in sending out from I appreciate you put me on the Keep Media Green emailing list, and I saw that, and I saw the email that you put out about the homes that are going up in Media for $1.5 million, and that was a lot of what I constructed that model on. And so you can see very clearly that that housing unit would not be that price if there were more density on that site. I mean, there's just no question. So on a very acute, absolute, new construction will be cheaper with more density. That is going to happen. And then as the impacts on the larger community, I can look around for that. It's going to be, I promise you, Very hard to find a one-to-one comparison because almost all of this work on the data side that I've seen, at least, Portland has done a ton of work on this, is dealing with communities that are substantially larger than Media, just because of the peer impacts of the peer need for larger data sets around all of this. But that might be an important place to look, is Portland, because they have done a lot of work around this. Another place to look, Jessica, I'm missing it. Was it Minneapolis that recently just abolished single family zoning?
I think so. I'm not sure. Let me quickly dig it up.
I believe Minneapolis is another case study to look at, where they recently essentially prohibited detached single family, or prohibited attached single family development from going forward, specifically to address these affordability issues.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Janine, Judy, Lisa, do you have any questions for us, Mark?
Oh, great presentation. Thank you.
Great. So like I said, we're going to be posting this on the borough's website via YouTube. I hope this has been a very good question answer period. I'd like to post that as well if you are all comfortable with it. And then what we will be doing is moving forward with a presentation to Robin and Terry, you're both on here, to keep media green. We have invited them to a meeting to talk about open space preservation. We are going to be putting together our technical analysis. Yeah, Addie, I'll get to you in 1 second. Okay, we'll be putting together our technical analysis and delivering that to the borough for review, as well as a summary of the workshop 1, which recently happened. So there's going to be a lot of, essentially the ball is in our court now, and I'm going to be grinding away at a lot of things up in probably through the holidays, unfortunately. And then we will be coming back with sort of a set of recommendations about how to move forward on the zoning ordinance. So I just know that we are working on this, and if we go a little quiet for the next couple of months, it's not because we've forgotten about you. We're just working. So Addie, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question is that in thinking about single family housing, and I remember reading an article about the abolishment in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
and form-based inclusionary, and the impact it's had on creating racial mixed communities, like, because single family homes basically kind of were created a lot of divisions in
Yeah.
white, black, brown, and other races. So I'm just wondering too how that would be impacted, because I think that's really important. I mean, we just had, and Tammy can speak more to this, we just had a wonderful celebration at Heritage Park, celebrating the history of the Black community in media. And our population, our racial or Black and brown population in media has fallen a lot since we moved here, so I'm just curious as to what the impact might be, because a diverse population is a healthy population.
Yeah, I think that's a really great, question. So you're right that zoning was traditionally used as, and along with a lot of other tools, as a mechanism to enforce segregation. That is clearly a historical part of the United States, and certainly the Philadelphia region. I mean, the Philadelphia suburbs exist in a lot of ways in their current form because of that. The impact of affordable housing on sort of your racial, ethnic diversity is something that I can't, provide any insights to, only because I don't know if how that interrelates with ethnic and racial diversity.
But no, it's not the affordable housing question. It's, I mean, or it's how the zoning, how you see hybrid,
Right.
form-based and possibly IZ, impacting, a better mixed community. So not affordable, take affordable housing out of the mix right now and just looking at.
Yeah. So, I mean, without, again, we're talking about recommendations here, which we're not going to get into. I mean, I think part of what has allowed media to be a diverse community has in part been the diversity of its housing stock. I think that is a reasonable thing to say. I don't have enough information or data to say how much of an impact that had, and I don't know enough about the history of media to talk about that. I'm sure the people at Fellowship House could talk a lot more about that, and I think efforts like Fellowship House are probably had as big of an impact on sort of the racial diversity of the community as any sort of housing policy could have. So the zoning, I don't think we can extrapolate much about the impact on racial and ethnic diversity other than to say providing options for people. And then it would take a lot more work and probably a good PhD thesis to really get into any sort of causal relationships there. Yeah, Terry.
Just really quickly, I'm here tonight as a board member of At Home Media CDC. I just want to say, and particularly for media, market-driven policies and for-profit housing have a lot of limitations. The whole idea behind nonprofit housing is to counter the market, like to buy a home, create 4 apartments, and to rent them at affordable rates, even if you're not making any profit. And so I just want to say to everyone who's really caring about affordable housing and media that the idea of building a strong nonprofit community development corporation might be the best way to get racial diversity and affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
Princeton.
Can you guys
And
hear me?
to be clear on this, just to make sure there's an extra fine point on this. There's nothing in the zoning that we would put in, or nothing in the hybrid form-based code that would prohibit or eliminate the possibility of nonprofit housing.
I do get that.
I think Tammy's trying to say something.
Yeah. So as far as like with Minneapolis eliminating single family zoning, that's not really going to impact the whole question about racial disparity. Most of that is economic. The largest part of it is economic. So here in media, again, segregation had the population, pretty much African Americans were stuck, or POC were stuck in a particular areas of media, not everywhere in media. So if anything, if I don't know, form-based zoning may create some density here or there so that folks of color have more choices about where they're going to live or that kind of thing. But this is for media, that's a wealth gap issue. And I had to think about what Karen said earlier about the Fellowship House, because people have bought houses in media going through the Fellowship House. But the issue is right now, that is not likely because of the price of the houses. And you also have an income-based situation, income-based qualifications so that you can use that money. So buying in media, you probably can't through the Fellowship House, but that would be now. That was not always the case, which is actually ridiculous, but that was not that long ago. That wasn't that long ago. So the more expensive it gets, it's not just about the racial divide or the spreading out or the losing of, because I think, Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going from about 19 or 20% POC in media to down to 6 is an economic issue. Nobody can afford it, white, black, or otherwise. People cannot live here.
Right.
And
So-
I think one of the most impactful things about this entire presentation is that it was affordable housing, but what also was said was workforce housing. That is who we're looking at. A regular workforce, people that go to work every day, pay their bills to the best of their ability, are having to choose between whether or not they can pay mortgage and pay their car note and buy food and make sure other things are going on. It's a whole lot more involved. So in media form-based zoning, unless we can bring these housing prices down, it's not really going to make an impact racially at all.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. Yeah, Robin.
Just to build on that comment and sort of your observation that, you know, smaller units and denser housing, you know, are obviously cheaper, but they're not necessarily more affordable. So like those houses, you know, that were advertised for $1.5 million could have been townhouses, and then they would have sold for, I don't know, like $850,000. So like it's definitely cheaper, but it's not affordable. And I think when you said like media is not going to build its way out of this problem, my perception, and obviously markets can change over time, but it seems like the demand is so insatiable. This town could absorb, you know, as many rich people as can batter down the door and snap up the houses as soon as they're on the market as high a price as the market will bear, you know, so that like even a tiny little row home on East Jefferson or East Franklin Street, you know, which was definitely working class housing, you know, sold for almost $500,000. Like it's really small, and that's cheaper than 1.5 million, but it's not affordable. And, you know, the set aside idea has some appeal, but my worry there is that in raw numbers, you might increase the raw number of people who, you know, are of moderate income who could afford to live here, but by allowing greater density, and let's say just say only 10% of the unit, the overall socioeconomic balance of the community might actually shift more the other way. Like more rich people and a smaller percentage of working class people than exists now. And it could, as you pointed out, incentivize the rapid demolition of existing affordable housing in exchange for sort of high density luxury housing with a small set aside. And that on the balance, that could throw our community off in terms of like a class stratification even more than it is now. So it's a real puzzle, like how to use the zoning to influence a market that is so profit driven. It's a frustrating conundrum. And you know, you laid it out pretty clearly, like what the risks are. And it sounds like you're saying that there's no guarantee that going down the path of greater density that is more aesthetically appealing and kind of palatable for the population results in a net increase in truly affordable housing for working class people in this community.
Yeah, so you've unpacked a lot there. And I think the one thing that I really want to highlight is, yes, this is incredibly complicated. And I think what I'm hearing in this conversation, which is great, and hearing and seeing in you is, you know, media has, you know, clearly on this call, a group of people who really care about this issue and are sort of marshaling resources to look at diversity of strategies to address affordable housing. And it is going to need to be a diversity of strategies. The question around density and affordability is very tricky. So the counterpoint that I would like to make, and maybe I should have included this, is yes, there may be an insatiable appetite for housing and media, and I really want to emphasize that term may, A good market analysis can project out another 3 or 5 years for you all and sort of find out generally what the demand in the region is. I did talk to Andrew at DVRPC today, and I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag about anything, but I know they are going to start looking at some affordable housing matrix and try to understand how affordable housing is changing in the region. And so you might get some data around there. Those are hard because they tend to be sort of regional numbers and can be sometimes hard to get down to the municipal level. So getting a sense of maybe you could build your way out of it. Like, I think it is something I want to just say that you may not be able to, but I also don't want to end the conversation and say it could be possible that there's demand for, let's say, 1,000 residential units in Media over the next 5 to 10 years. And that if you are able to find a good location for those 1,000 residential units, there's going to be less demand in the surrounding zones, and that's going to reduce the price pressure in Media. I don't know. The other thing to be looking at is I also don't know what the type of demand is. Maybe all of the demand is for townhouses and nobody's really looking at it. I doubt that's the case, but a good market study could sort of dig into that in a little bit of detail. The other counter case, though, that I want to point your attention to is San Francisco. Because San Francisco right now is the sort of quintessential example of a community that fought density very hard, made a lot of very, very strong community organization that pushed back very much on the development of large multifamily development, kept San Francisco feeling very San Francisco-y in terms of sort of built environment. It is cute and adorable, and it's got all of the little row homes and everything. And it is near impossible to afford a place there because the demand is so great to live there. They did not build essentially anything to address it. And as a result, prices skyrocketed. And then they lost, it's a really kind of tragic story that San Francisco is no longer what San Francisco was. It's lost its identity because of the fight to save its identity, if that makes sense. And I think it's a very good cautionary tale to the don't try to build your way out of it. It's also don't try to smother it, because these are forces that are beyond, in some ways, your control. And so my biggest recommendation is pay very close attention to those things which you can control and those things which you can't control. And then ask for lots of serenity, as they always say.
Yeah. It just seems that building all kinds of housing would actually impact the community, but we're so tiny. But
Yeah.
if it was like if we were able to create many more different types of housing, that might be the key to making something happen here. But right.
I would also, this really goes back, and I do want to emphasize this. I really think it's going to be important for you all to, as best as you can, understand the degree of the problem and what the problem is. I think until you do a pretty good analysis of your housing stock and your affordability, you're not going to know really how bad of an affordable housing problem you have and where your affordable housing problem is. Like, I have done a little, searching around on Craigslist and on Zillow. And there are still a fair number of units in Media that are reasonably priced. And I have not done quite frankly, any analysis of the affordable housing trends over the years. But that could be an important place to start. Sometimes we can get some sticker shock and see the price of something and not necessarily understand the bundle of goods essentially that are being sold as part of that. So something to think about.
Is that kind of analysis is not within the scope of work of your current contract? Is that accurate?
That kind of analysis is really outside of the scope of our work. We are, quite frankly, on a very tight budget as it sits right now. And so delving deep into the affordable housing question is not there. And that's why, the big message that I want to make sure kind of comes out of this is there's nothing that we're going to be doing as part of the zoning which would preclude you all from adjusting the zoning going forward, or doing things like inclusionary zoning, or doing things like Terry suggested, which is sort of like a land bank model to development of affordable housing. None of that would be prohibited as part of this process. If anything, what I would hopefully be able to deliver to you all, and I think I will be able to deliver to you all, is a zoning ordinance that you can adjust and change that will, if, for example, you want to increase the density in a certain area, or you want to increase housing or introduce housing into a certain area, you can do that with, minor modification to the zoning ordinance and still have all the benefits of a hybrid form-based approach, which is a lot more predictability, a lot more clarity on what is permitted and what's not permitted in terms of design, and then hopefully a real floor when it comes to some of the key quality elements when it comes to housing. Right.
Personally, Adam and Jessica, I want to say thank you very much. This has been very informative. Some moments of, we all know that, but it's always good, and some aha moments. And also, understanding that there are partnerships to be had, and many people working in this, maybe from different aspects and in different ways, but to bring resources together. And I personally find that very exciting. Aside from a nonprofit, Tammy, and I know Princeton has worked so well with creating a nonprofit for affordable housing issues and home ownership, staying in home ownership issues. Sorry, that was the word issues. I don't like that, but solving problems. They've done a really good job. And, I know for our group, we'd love to see the Borough Council bring affordable housing into their community and development. So it's community and housing development and not just the CDC. So there's a lot, I think there's a whole lot to be explored and to be recognized and to work together. So thank you. I'll shut up now. I can go on too.
No, that's great. That's a great thing to end on. And thank you all very much. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to Jessica or I.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty.